Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. As you all know, ready or not, hybrid work is here to stay. GPTW research has found that 3 out of 5 Fortune 500 executives believe that up to 25% of their workforce will continue to work remotely full-time post-pandemic. In the words of Great Place to Work CEO Michael Bush, going forward, place doesn't matter, but flexibility should. He says, I don't think of the hybrid future as one of physical space. I think of it as really caring for people and giving them the flexibility that's needed to have a high sense of well-being. A recent HBR article on 5 challenges of hybrid work and how to overcome them include culture, communication, coordination, connection, and creativity. Keeping these 5 C's in mind, we will discuss how managers at different companies are dealing with these challenges to ensure that they allow for flexibility, which is demanded by the employees today, but also keep in mind that they need to ensure as leaders, as managers, that all employees get to experience a common organization culture. To discuss this, we have 2 industry experts who will share what companies are doing to enable their managers to deal with some of these challenges. Let me introduce you to our panelists. We have Abbas Rizvi. He's the head of people analytics and programs at Ericsson, where he's heading Workforce Planning and HR Project Office for Southeast Asia, Oceania, and India. In his 12 years with the organization, he has managed various roles, including Head of HR Operations Excellence, Region Shared Services, Delivery Head for Latin America and North America, and also has been Talent Acquisition SME for India. With a career spanning more than 17 years, he has a management degree from NIT Allahabad and loves studying history, economics, literature, and changing demographics of human resources in India. I'll introduce you to our other panelist, Joy George. He currently works as Senior Director and Head HR for CDK Global in India. He has 24 years of experience that cover all aspects of employee lifecycle management, including recruitment and resourcing, learning and development, compensation and benefits, employee engagement and communication, and legal and statutory, of which 15 plus years of experience has been in HR senior leadership roles. And he's been part of the top leadership team in various organizations in the past too, like the Tata Group, Capita, etc. He has lots of qualification. He is an LLB from Symbiosis. He has a master's in personal management from Pune University, and he also has a master's of philosophy. His many interests include reading, writing, lecturing, thinking, and philosophizing. Welcome, Abbas and Joy, to this webinar. I'm sure all our guests today will be very, very delighted to hear your views based on all your experience in the past so many years. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you all a few questions to start the conversation flowing. And then, of course, we'll just take it as it flows. We will keep about 15 to 20 minutes at the end for questions from the panelists. Yeah. So Abbas, if I can start with you, we talked about one of the 5 C's being culture. So how are you creating the kind of workplace culture that enables your managers to effectively manage work in the hybrid mode?
Thanks a lot to Great Places to Work for giving me this opportunity to be part of this panel. Keyuri, first of all, to start with, the most important thing that we have to keep in mind is what exactly is the challenge thrown by this entire work from home, flexible working or hybrid working, whatever you like to call it. The biggest challenge is that most of the people, specifically, and I'm talking about from an Indian perspective, because in Ericsson, for example, working from home or flexible working was not very new. A lot of countries, it was part of culture. Those were exercising in that thing. Europe and North America obviously had it a little bit more, specifically in terms of, but obviously depending on the kind of roles. In India, culturally, and now I'll use the word, in India, culturally, this is something that is being practiced by a lot of organizations, no doubt. I mean, I know organizations like IBM had been, working, even Ericsson had been following that. But culturally, we are not very prone. I mean, and I'll be honest, including me. conventionally one of those. I was conventionally one of those who would have preferred to go to the office, sit there, have an environment, the working on and off kind of a button. But this entire situation, specifically after the pandemic, what exactly was thrown on us was we were into a situation where we had to manage virtual teams. A lot of organizations specifically are working very closely. Teams are working very closely, and that was the biggest challenge. Now, what exactly is the challenge is to train these people actually to get onto how exactly virtual working can be made part of their, DNA. And that's where exactly the culture comes into picture. So how exactly what the performance management, how the organization is actually trying to equip these people with abilities and skills to actually measure performance, not from, we have an old saying, out of sight, out of mind. That exactly has to be taken out. So how exactly managers can be working together with the team in a virtual environment, doing their measurement of the work, understanding that productivity is not based on presence. Productivity is something which actually counts. So I would say, I'm coming from an analytics background, working into analytics. I would say the most important part is equipping the people with a mindset, but also management by numbers. That is also a very important thing, because if you can really manage by numbers, if you are equipped, so the organization has to come into the picture, provide these people with right set of data, how exactly the measurement of productivity can be done, how the people can be measured, flexibility, and the culture of accommodation. That's basically the key to this entire thing, which we call flexible working or hybrid working.
Thanks so much, Abbas. I'm going to ask Joy a follow-up question to what you said, and I really like what you said, Abbas, that, what it talks about is how do you get mindset changes, and that's what really we're going to be talking about. So, Joy, what's your view? What are leaders doing today to encourage their managers and to change their mindsets regarding hybrid working?
Yeah, thank you so much, GPTW team, for this opportunity to share some of the views on this forum. This topic is, being debated internally and externally. Internally, in the sense of, within the organization, everybody, senior leaders and managers, do try to arrive at some sort of inference as to what works best and otherwise. Now, of course, there are three categories of people in the organization. One, the senior leaders, and then the managers, and then obviously the rest of the employees. It's important that all three of them are equally aligned and convinced at some point of time to make it happen. Otherwise, it's going to be one versus the other. In my definition, obviously, can be seen as a little tricky and controversial in many sense. Hybrid working can be a sort of organized chaos or mess if it is not managed well. So managing well is the key in creating success for hybrid working. I would think, I know you did read out the observations of, GPTW CEO talking about, this is going to be something relatively long term, but I like to think that this is a relatively shorter term than a long term solution to work. These are some of my personal views. Of course, in CDK, our work culture has empathy as a key component, no questions on that. And our core values are of, being open, own it, be curious, and create possibilities. These are 4 values that we follow. And these have been generally our guiding principles as we try to navigate through this new world of work. Of course, at CDK, changing mindset, like in any other workplace, has not been an overnight activity. But what we did was we engaged our employees with, right amount of communication and positive messaging. And these messagings have been aimed at creating awareness as to why should they work from office. We were not trying to say that you should not be working from remote locations, but why should you be choosing office first and remote second? We created awareness using a kind of, the one of those most popular framework called FOMO, essentially fear of missing out, but we coined it as fear of missing office. And we try to create campaigns around some of these aspects as to, if at all you don't make it to office, what is it that you're likely to miss out? Just to name probably 3 or 4 of them. One, of course, was, connectedness, which is very, very important in everybody's life. A structured and unstructured time that people get in the office to engage, share, and discuss work and beyond work, you will miss if you choose to work remotely. was one messaging that we sent out, and I think it touched the hearts of many people and realized, yeah, this is important to me. The other one was obviously better collaboration. Tasks that are interdependent in nature, and most of the things that we do today, although we think are independent, they are really interdependent. And those interdependent tasks gets done much better when in office was the second pitch that we made. That also was pretty received well. And the third thing was, look at efficiency. Obviously, Abbas did make a couple of observations about, how do we look at productivity? How do we measure all of those things? Efficiency obviously is, can do more, achieve more sort of a thing. And we realized it is probably better if one is, or greater if one is based out of office, purely because you may have a slightly better infrastructure to support some of these things. Obviously, remote working over the last 2 years, has come a long way, and a lot of the infrastructure evolved in the country over the last 24 to 28 months time. And so therefore that may not be too bad, but at the same time, that is not comparison to the infrastructure that you get in the office. And the fourth point that we try to impress upon our people was about, superior creativity. When people are physically together, they brainstorm more ideas and generate more creative outcomes. When you are alone, probably you don't do as much. When you are in a Zoom, you probably are not excited as much. So some of these things that we used, fear of missing office framework messaging, I think it worked well for us. While we provide all the flexibility for people to remotely connect as required, provided there is a valid reason, I think we have successfully managed to get close to 60% of our people working from office on a daily basis at this point of time.
Great. Thanks, Joy. You touched on so many aspects. It's amazing that so many things have to come together. And I loved your idea of using FOMO as a hook to get people back to office, saying what are they missing out? Because that is really what I think all organizations are trying to do, because employees always look at something, some aspects of it, and don't look at other aspects. So, and if we want people to collaborate, it has been shown that it's best done in the workplace. So thanks a lot, Joy, for sharing that. Abbas, a question to you really is, we've talked so much about how we're going to get managers to help people understand that it's best for them to come to office through this whole FOMO concept. But what are some of the kind of things you're doing to enable your managers to do this? Because for managers too, this is a change management process. So what are the kind of leadership development or other managerial development programs you're having, or to help managers to deal with some of these challenges?
So during the very start of 2020, when the lockdowns actually started in various parts of the world, the most important thing, at least in our market area, that is Southeast Asia, Oceania, and India, the first thing that actually we started was that the talent management function within the HR started designing and developing and talking to partners to, put up modules which can help actually virtual leadership. So that was the first part, and we actually wanted all our people managers to go through it. Then obviously a very strong connect with the people business partners, with these people managers, and obviously with the other part of the organization also, in terms of providing them assistance, in dealing with the changes that are coming with it. I'll not talk about employee because you have talked about managers, but obviously for the other employees also, I would rather like to mention. Sure. Because we've also started up employee assistance program. Employee assistance program was basically, working with a partner. We actually went with a partner across all geographies. They established their contact centers for people. These were basically around issues pertaining to work or their personal life, etc. Mostly, obviously the partner does not share a lot of data with us, because that's a private data. But obviously people also started going with the psychological issues, with this kind of a pressure, whether it be work, whether it be whatever, being locked up in a place, trying to balance work and life. Obviously those kind of situations actually arrive. But training on virtual leadership, training on how exactly the performance management should be done in newer conditions. So that was also, so the entire redesigning of the process obviously was required, not from a flow perspective, but from a, you can say decision making perspective, how exactly those measurements should be done. And obviously counseling the managers and keeping up a lot of training programs in terms of understanding, difference between performance and what you call, technically what we call is, the last date effect, whatever exactly. So you obviously, when what you see is what exactly you always believe in. So that kind of a cultural shift obviously was facilitated. Performance measurement. On the other hand, if you talk about workforce, so these are all talent management functions, you can say initiatives. From a workforce planning perspective, what we have done is we have established, we have invested a lot in technology in the past 2 years now. The kind of technology that we are trying to introduce is where exactly the reports and the performance matrix can actually be available from a push and pull perspective, single button access designs, kind of data that is actually is required. A lot of benchmark data from the market and from other market areas, the counterparts sitting in other market areas, what exactly they are doing, how exactly they are measuring performance based on whether it be net sales, whatever, or different functions in terms of their productivity. People analytics, a lot of people analytics, changes in demographics, how exactly their people are faring under various kind of leadership and various people who are basically as leaders. That actually was made available to people at separate at various levels and various layers, so that there can be strong, as I mentioned earlier, also management by numbers. Because when you're not seeing people, obviously, and you have larger organizations, management by numbers become a very important factor. So provisioning of right data, culturally counseling people, giving them platform to come back, and discuss what exactly are the issues, and then providing them good content in terms of how the virtual leadership and virtual team management can be done. So those are some of the initiatives, important initiatives that we launched with time.
Sure. Thanks, Abbas. A very, very relevant point, and I love the management by numbers. We always talk of management by objectives. We have various kind of phrases, but management by numbers. And you're absolutely right, because one of the things that people are talking about is saying, is there a proximity bias? So is people, just because managers are seeing people in the corridor, they're remembering them, and therefore they might give them a better performance rating, or they'll think that they're working hard and the others are not. So, how are we eliminating some of those aspects? So that's very, very relevant, Abbas. Thanks for raising that. And Joy, do you have anything to add to that bit about how can we remove proximity bias in managers beyond the management by numbers? Because finally, numbers can tell a story, but managers do still have their own biases. So do you have any suggestions to managers of how to really focus on numbers, focus on results, and not just see how many hours the person is sitting in front of them, or whether they've met them at the water cooler for a conversation?
Absolutely. I may not have a sort of set of solutions to prescribe as such, but I can definitely endorse the size of the problem, and probably give a couple of perspectives to it as well. Indeed, this is a very difficult question, or a kind of stuff that we need to deal with. But the fact is that it is very real and relevant. And so therefore, we can't brush it aside. I'm happy that you brought it up in this conversation, at least for us to think about. We may not find a solution. And let's also admit that, ensuring or balancing fairness in this remote and hybrid is not going to be easy. We may have all the tools under the sun. We may have all the will to be as objective as possible, but this is not going to be so very easy. Abbas did speak about out of sight and out of mind. Fact of the matter is, out of sight is going to be out of mind unless you are so very conscious about it, right? And that's what we need to create in our managers as the first thing. Be aware that there are people who are out of sight. If at all you look at what are those areas wherein bias is likely to come in, and the most touchy or most relevant personal thing wherein this can come in is nothing but performance management. At the end of the day, having spent 365 days under somebody as a manager / leader, when an employee goes in for a performance review, The last thing they want to hear is, because I didn't see you or because you were remotely connected, I have no idea what did you do, right? That's not the answer anybody would expect. And performance management by nature of the function itself is an emotional activity. It's an emotional activity. One is eager to hear as to how great the year has been, and hopefully the leader or the manager is eager to say as well as to how great the year has been. Anyway, so I think, what I want to endorse over here is, as leaders, we ought to accept that this is a genuine problem, existential in nature. We have it real in hand at this point of time. And if you look at it, interestingly, remote working or hybrid working is, while it is catching up, there are no laws or guidelines that is governing this at this point of time as to, in the first place, what should you be doing, what should you not be doing, right? All protocols around hybrid working is not yet established. It's still in a phase of evolution. Therefore, today what you see is every organization is trying to define definition of hybrid work for them or remote work for them. Also, what is the best approach? So that's the phase we are. Let's accept that. Since we don't have answers to all of these things, what I like to put out over here is, being open to and willing to listen and learn. Say from forums such as this, as what is being done by other organizations that are sounding sensible and meaningful could be one way of looking at, So therefore, the disposition to hear the other as to how have they been navigating is one thing that I would appeal to all the leaders and managers when they have to deal with the situation of bias. Second thing is, while there may not be any blueprint or a design for successfully navigating through hybrid environment, focusing on a few things, for example, flexibility, which is core, right? It is going to be the key characteristic of work anyway. Inclusion, and that word inclusion includes people anywhere, connected anywhere on the aspect of work. Well-being, everybody would like to be taken care of. Purpose, in the sense of being told, how important and what is the relevance of what you do, and probably one more to add, perceived value. Even if I am on a hybrid model, remotely working, and my leader or manager may not have seen me in office for many days and weeks, I think it's important for me to be told about the value that I generate. I think some of these things will be a sort of right step or a right direction to navigate through. And if I have to call out some very ordinary stuff that all of us anyway do, could be make sure that the objectives and goals, performance goals, are set very, very clearly. That's something that most people don't do it, and that's something that I keep reminding our folks in my organization as well. And of course, it's not enough to put in the goal. Somebody has to take the initiative of doing a periodic check-in, and that somebody should be none other than the manager or the leader who takes the initiative to do a periodic check-in for a connect and conversation. And some of these things can really minimize the bias and at least give the other feeling of, I'm included, is what I would think. In short, if I have to put it, I for one would think the underlying challenge that we are talking about here is, unfortunately, increasing trust deficiency. Increasing trust deficit, not deficiency, trust deficit is and interestingly, this is one of the key fallouts of a remote working or hybrid model. Therefore, minimizing the extent of remote working is the most ideal.
Thanks, Joy. I think you've given us a lot of very, very critical key messages. What I think stays with me the most is the concept of listen and learn. And I think today, in this ever-changing world, especially the last 2-3 years, we've seen the world just change so much. And I think if managers are not going to be willing, and leaders, not going to be willing to listen to others, like you rightly said, through forums like this. I mean, there are hundreds of articles, anytime you open any social media, you'll see there's a debate about, is hybrid good, is it not good? I mean, there's so much, but you have to keep your mind open and listen and learn. So thanks so much for that, Joy. And you brought out a lot of things, that people need to be flexible, they need to set goals, etc., clearly be inclusive. So that takes me to a question which I think I'll address Abbas on. Abbas, how do you see some of the competencies or skills that managers have? How have they changed because of hybrid working? What is a manager of the past and how is the manager of today different in terms of some 3 or 4 key competencies which they need, which they may not have needed in the past, but today they need. So any views on that, Abbas, would be very helpful.
That's a very, very important and a very valid question, actually, because whatever uh, was there in the past is not here today.
Right.
And I don't remember exactly the line, but these are exactly the lines from Alice in Wonderland. I cannot go back into yesterday because I'm not the same person
Absolutely.
anymore. Something like that. But
Absolutely.
this is a very important fact because things actually have changed, and I won't say that something new has come up, but let me use this word that we can be 80, 20, 60, 40, 70, 30 in various grids, but today the aggression for those grids actually have gone up. So for example, I'll put up in today's scenario, when you are working in this kind of a thing where you have, the question is not that you like hybrid or you don't like hybrid. The challenge is that the talent pool actually has started behaving in such a manner, and a smart organization is one which actually has to adopt. So I'm not saying that flexible working is good or bad, because every organization and every person can actually have a very fair idea or a very different idea about it. The challenge is that I cannot go and say that flexibility is something I will adopt or not adopt, because unfortunately a lot of talent, specifically in the technology space, is not ready. I know people who have moved on to places like Pune or Dehradun or something like this, who really don't want to come back and start working in Delhi or Bombay. Now, unfortunately, I've seen CEOs moving out. So what can you talk about the people? That's the people who are getting the profits out of it.
Right.
But anyways, what I'm saying is that the managers also need to change. We really need to change, not because, but we have to change. Not because we want to change or we don't want to change, but we have to change. When I say the aggression in terms of the grids, actually, so a manager today without the art of delegation, the right delegation, cannot really survive in the new hybrid working model. So right delegation and the art of delegation has to be very important, because sitting at some place, delegating the right set of work to right set of people in equal proportion, making people have a good work-life balance without actually seeing them, is now on a higher grid. So delegation is one of those things that actually is important. Second part is because we are not the people now anymore who actually take up our bags and move out of the office. Therefore, that on and off switch, which actually was a very physical switch of coming to the office and opening the laptop, and the managers actually have to understand that not only they have to practice the time management, because if they do not practice the time management, then automatically it brings up the team under immense pressure and tremendous psychological issue. So that time management actually has to be propagated, practiced, preached in the right manner. Managers actually have to be trainers who are automatic alarms to basically set up a culture within the organization in terms of right team management. Then you have to be a smart communicator in this environment. You cannot run away without being because sitting at some place, you have to be good at art of writing communication, or maybe saying it very well, pronouncing it all together in the team. So that communication piece also becomes and the most important one, compliance focus. uh, Today we are exchanging a lot of data through in the virtual world. It's not physical exchanges which are actually happening, and therefore the importance for compliances like encryption, what kind of mails have to be encrypted, what kind of data actually has to travel via mail, what exactly is the importance of sharing data through drives or sharing data through uh, you know uh, uh, tools that are actually made by the organization, how securitized they are, and what exactly is the, so that also has to be a focus that the managers need to practice, specifically in the technology space where the organizations are working on patents, intellectual properties, etc. So that becomes very important. And the most important, emerging, in the emerging scenario, if you look at managers, they really need to build up network, build strong relationships, have to pay up equal attention. So I would rather like to name it as the importance of emotional and cultural intelligence. That is a very important part, because people need to understand where exactly how the team is faring, how exactly their people are faring. So that intelligence actually has to be. And last point, which obviously Joy also mentioned in some way or the other, empathizing with differences. We popularly call it diversity and inclusiveness, but I believe that's more to do is empathizing with differences. We are very different people, how exactly we are. And that is not only about gender, that is not only about some orientation, that is about our behaviors, our way of, our life, our family structures. People who are single parents have a different kind of a life. People who are bachelors, you cannot expect them to be in office because they are bachelors. So empathizing with the differences is a very important part of it. So I believe this is a complete landscape in which the managers need to actually evolve.
That's great, Abbas. You brought about so many points, and I really think each one of them is very, very important in its own ways. And I think a lot of employees have experienced this, that, there's been some people seem to be working too hard, some people not hard enough. And because the manager is not seeing them, they're sort of allocating work to the person perhaps who does it the fastest, saying, okay, this guy or woman is a good person, does their work quickly, let's give them more work. And because it's the whole out of sight, out of mind. So how do you do fair work allocation become very critical. All clients that we work with in Great Place to Work, a lot of them in our surveys, in our work with managers, we realize that work-life balance has become a challenge due to sometimes a disproportionate work allocation. And I think delegation is definitely key. And the on and off switch. I mean, I really love that term that you use, because very often all of us through lockdown said, we're working from home, we're saving 2 hours in commute, let's work longer hours. But that's not really what we need to do, right? We need to work smarter, we need to work harder. So great stuff. And of course, we can't discount the whole empathy, emotional intelligence piece at all. So definitely very, very critical. Joy, I want to go back to a point that you raised, which is very important. And, at Great Place to Work, we keep talking about high trust, high performance cultures. And you raised the talk about the point about trust, right? So how do we get our teams to, connect with the organization goals? You also said that that's a challenge, but how do managers today get the teams to see that, these are the organization goals, this is what you're performing towards, and therefore motivate them to continue working even if they're working remotely? Because I think a huge challenge very often with teams that we've seen is that they feel they're doing this little bit of work and they don't see a connection to the higher goals, especially when they're not interacting sometimes with leaders regularly who can talk about those goals. So how are we doing that? How are you doing, let's say, a more structured or a different way of cascading goals to the teams so they understand how their performance is linked to the organization performance?
Of course, no questions on that. Ensuring that people have the right set of goal is where all remote work success can begin, according to me. Because if people sitting in let's say 10,000 locations, trying to do what they think is the right thing for the organization, it may not lead to necessarily the outcome that the organization is looking forward to. So therefore, setting goal is absolutely important that are aligned. Now, I normally, on a lighter note, I do make this serious observation. If there is one reason why any of us should be seriously worried about being with any organization, is that if we don't have the right set of goals that are aligned to the organization's priority. If people sit in the organization without their goals being aligned to the priorities of the organization, could be a matter of serious concern. And even more on a lighter note, I do tell them, if there are anybody in the organization who do not have a goal, you might as well declare a holiday for yourself, and you being at home, you will do a world of good for yourself and for the organization. All that I'm trying to say is how important it is for all of our employees to have goals that are aligned to that of the priorities of the organization. No questions again. Now, the fact today, or the tragedy today is, it is not that people don't achieve their goals. Many of them don't have goals to achieve. And these are all beautiful statements we have heard multiple times, read at multiple places, but still people don't attach enough of importance to this. And like I said, in a hybrid environment, this has become quite essential, or core to fundamental. Right set of goals, alignment with the priorities, regular check-ins and periodic reviews are very, very important. And that's the only way for you to know that you still do stay relevant, and what you do, what you're doing today is relevant to what the organization is. Of course, goal setting and objective cascading are all processes that got matured over a period of time with every organization. So it's the case with CDK Global. We have right at the beginning of any fiscal year, different off sites that are set up for people to come together, deliberate over business priorities. It happens at our senior leadership team, or rather the executive leadership team. Then obviously the senior leaders do meet up. And in India, we have had we have had our own offsite, wherein the central topic was accelerating success, key differentiators for the year. What are the key differentiators for the year? And we expect, and we have set guidelines to our employees that please align your goals towards accelerating success, obviously defined in detail over a set of guideline, etc. So if I have to give you some specific things, like in case of our organization's managers are obviously equipped to do this through right set of tools, which is most basic. If that's not there, you can't do much about, particularly if you have got a bigger scale to manage. And then, of course, the process, we also guide and coach them, like Abbas was trying to say these days, since many of the leaders and managers are doing some of these things for the first time. It is important them to be guided as to what is the best way to do. So after tool comes the process. And then, of course, third one is, fair amount of hand holding as, what are the best things and what are the right set of things that you should be doing. I would think we are fairly successful in doing this. At the end of our performance assessment year, we typically do a kind of dipstick study just to see how did people feel about this exercise, where they communicated, did they understand, did they have a sense of purpose, value, alignment, all of those things. Last year, our satisfaction index was 96%. This year, in the sense of, very recently we concluded that exercise, it dropped by 1%, 95%. So 96, 95, not a bad number, although I'm a little worried as to why 1% drop there. But essentially, it's fairly well managed at this point of time, is all that I want to share here.
Thanks so much, Joy. And you talked about how purpose is very important, and we've all been reading over the last couple of years that the younger population, the younger people in the world, in the whole world, are saying, it's not enough for me to work 18 hours a day. I need to work for an organization where I can be aligned to the purpose, to the larger purpose of the organization. All organizations are clearly defining what their purpose is, especially around working towards sustainability, all kinds of things like that. So Abbas, a question to you. How are managers today, when they're hiring people, able to gauge whether the people who are joining them, the organization, what their purpose is it aligned to organization purpose? Are they going to be motivated to work here, or are they just looking at this as a stepping stone, as a paycheck, or are they aligned? Because if you're motivated to work because your purpose is aligned to the organization purpose, then all these questions around, is a person moonlighting? Are they working really 8 hours a day, or are they doing some work for other people, which are huge, complex issues that have come up of late. And we just read articles in the press every day about some of these challenges. But, our belief at Great Place to Work is that if employees are motivated because they connect with the purpose of the organization, and this is what we've seen through our research, then they will give the organization their best. So how are managers being supported, being enabled to hire the right people, to understand that these are the right people we are hiring who are going to be motivated for the right reasons?
Okay. So I'll start with a very cruel example. Okay. Why I say cruel? Because first, it's not about the people, it's about the manager. In one of the organizations that I used to work before Ericsson, there was seniority obviously had two ways, very clearly defined. Whether you are a team manager, whether you're going to, and it was all equal, the pay scales were equal, but the roles actually were very different. Either you manage a team or you take up an individual contributor role. I always believe that that's a path. Before taking, a person should actually understand that what kind of a people manager he or she is. So first of all, to say that, you know, equipping a people manager to understand that is a very, I really do not adhere to that part of philosophy. A people manager is a person who understands, and that's the reason he's a people manager. You know, so if a people manager comes to me and says, I really need to understand how should I hire, then you should not be a people manager. You know how to hire, and that's why you should be a people manager. You know, because that's the team building. That's what exactly is the most important part of your of the role. So that's, I mean, that's a philosophical argument that I just wanted to make, and that's why I called it cruel. So yes, people managers have to understand that what kind of people they are hiring, and that's a philosophy that trickles top down. You know, is every hire, you know, an aspiration of the organization of hiring a future leader? If that philosophy actually percolates in the system, that are we developing leaders within the system? When we are we hiring them for a product or a team fit, or are we hiring them for future leadership? If I am hiring a person, am I only hiring that because I mean, I'll give a very interesting example. I was talking to one of my colleagues, and we were talking about hiring a person, and she was hiring for her team, and this person actually came from a workforce planning background. You know, and I said it's a wonderful profile, and we were talking, and and the best remark came from her. Abbas, the best part is that once she has spent 2-3 years with me, probably the next role for her would be either under you or your role itself. You know, so if we are hiring with that idea that the person's aspirations and the person's, so we are hiring future leaders, so that's the most important piece. If you're hiring, so first of all, if you're hiring future leaders and you're not hiring team fits or product fits or team needs, you know, today I need this specifically and therefore this person fits into the need of today, then obviously this word, and may I borrow it from Joy, organized chaos can be managed very well. Because then what we are doing is, if we are hiring the right aspiration, if we are hiring ambitious people, assessing the right behavior that they are also aspiring to grow with the organization, if managers start believing that a person pushing from below is basically a push to beyond for him or her also, then I believe that would, this is a very natural process. To be very honest, this is basically how a culture obviously is developed within the organization. We don't teach people, we just hire people from that culture. You know, that's the only argument that I can give. You cannot teach a person to be ambitious. You cannot teach a person to be aspiring to be a future leader. You have to hire the right set of people from that cultural mindset or that mindset to build up a culture of your own. I believe that's the most honest answer that I can give you, rather than saying that, you know, we really need to put in ambition into people. You can't.
I
And
absolutely.
then you're moonlighting, and, you know, people running across, switching off, running on to some other things, obviously would not be there at all. Because if you are an aspirational person, if you have certain objectives for yourself within the organization, obviously you'd like to be, and that person would like to be part of everything, would like to be in the news, in the midst of every happening that is actually taking place in the organization. And that's what exactly is the solution to all that. I mean, I believe, and organizations who are actually going ahead with hybrid working model need to be very careful that are they really that kind of an organization? Are they really hiring future leaders? Yeah, I mean, that's a perspective from my side to it.
No, thanks so much, Abbas, because I think what you raised as a point, which is very valid, is are we hiring future leaders? So are the managers who are doing invested in hiring people, are they seeing whether the person who's coming into the job can replace them? So are they going to be willing to take on such bright talent into the organization who will eventually go in to replace them, or are they going to feel threatened about it? You know, so these are some of the things that we need to really look at. And I absolutely agree with you that if you're not understanding that, you know, we're hiring future leaders, then who are you hiring? Are you just hiring because you have this pressure on you that there's a project to be done and there's a number to fill, and then you may shortchange yourself as an organization. So thanks a lot for that. Joy, you talked earlier about collaboration, right? About how collaboration is best happening in when people come into a physical space together. So how do you see organizations changing even the physical office spaces to make sure that people are not still working as though they were working at home and sticking to their laptops, but actually sitting together and collaborating with each other? Do you see any changes that are happening in that way? Are people actually saying, okay, when everyone is in office, let's see how we can do something, do brainstorming sessions, work together, instead of again being stuck at our laptop with our headphones on, saying, I'm still working on a Zoom call or a Teams call. So are you seeing any changes in that respect?
Of course, we do see a lot of changes, and then I do read a lot of articles about how things are changing to drive collaboration even in a remote environment as well, because it is important and critical to every business. Like I may have mentioned, and like all of us may have read it in multiple places, three things are very, very important from a work perspective. One being collaboration, second being innovation, third being engagement of people, right? So collaboration is there right at the center of things. And I'm very sure this question itself has come up in this forum for us to debate, because this seemed to be a concern. Is it really happening in this hybrid model or not? I'm of the firm belief that collaboration would work better when everybody is at the workplace, and that statement I already made as part of the former framework that we were using. Now, if you look at, there are a lot of things in life that we as humans actually do which are interdependent. And human life itself is interdependent, if I have to sound a little philosophical like the way Abbas was trying to be. And one such thing is work itself. If you look at, I think, at least I have gone through three phases in my career with respect to the definition of work. The first phase of work, I saw it as dependent, in the sense of I was heavily dependent on people as to what do I do, how do I do, when do I do, all of those things. Then, then people fairly started talking about independent, in the sense of, be on your own, drive things your own, manage yourself, etc. But I think, finally I have, at least in my mind, settled down to a status which I call is work is interdependent. What I do, probably I can have a false feeling that I can do it all by myself, but that's a false feeling and impression that I can. Fact of the matter is, anything that I do, if it is independent, it may not have much of an impact, is the way I believe. So interdependent, so therefore the need for collaboration is absolutely important. Now the point is, how do we do some of those things in this new ways of working? And again, I don't have a sort of piece of wisdom to share with any of you. I'm just sounding off some thoughts, and then obviously would like to hear from others as well. One thing is, I think it's important for people to meet up daily. Obviously, if they can't meet up daily, at least a couple of times a week. And this meetup is not, hours and hours of sit-down meetings. It can be just a sort of, half an hour quick call, connecting, waking up everybody saying, hey, it is Monday, it is Tuesday, it is Wednesday. We are supposed to be achieving certain things, delivering certain things. I'm dependent on you. You are dependent on me. Collectively, we need to deliver. So that daily connect. In my team, I do thrice a week, and my team, in certain forums, wherein I was not present, they said, one of the reasons why we have been able to drive engagement and collaboration is because we meet very often. So that was one thing. The other thing is, of course, like I said, review of common goals as often as possible. Nobody should be given a feeling that goals of the function, goals of the department, goals of the organization just happen when all of us individually sit isolated place and work. I think people should be given that message every now and then. Hey, look, all of us need to collaborate, work together, and be aligned. And then periodic review of the outcomes or the dashboard. Most of us are used to reviewing dashboards and scorecards with our leaders, with our bosses or managers. We seldom review it with our own team. Why not? And I was this morning, I was just giving an example. Should you happen to log into a live cricket match, what is the first thing that you will look at? You want to know what the score is. You're not trying to figure out who is the batsman or who is the bowler. Those things come secondary, right? It's important for the team to know what the score is or where the scores are, because they want to know whether you are winning or losing. So these are some of the ways of driving collaboration. Keep them informed. Bring in that collective responsibility by reviewing certain key metrics on a periodic basis, etc. And nothing like encouraging people to come to office once in a while, and then enable people to meet with each other, and then have conversations around some of these things as well.
Thanks so much, Joy. I think, the talk about what you mentioned, the realization that work is interdependent, and the fact that goals very often in organizations are very siloed. So even when you do goal cascading, you do it for a department. You don't do goals which are functional, right? So you don't say let's say the goal of sales can't happen if the finance team doesn't do the billing properly, right? So how are those goals interdependent? We very often don't talk about it. And the collaboration piece, I think, where it has suffered the most, while teams within themselves are collaborating perhaps to whatever extent they are on Teams, Zoom call, the interdepartmental collaboration has suffered the most. And people have definitely realized that, that is something we can improve on. Yeah. We have like about 10 minutes left. We have a few questions from the audience. So I'm going to take those. And then, of course, if we have time, we can get back to having further discussions, but I don't want to ignore our audience. So Abbas, there's a question for you here, specifically asked for you, saying, has Ericsson introduced any specific initiatives for women, working parents around flexibility and relooked at some of the hybrid work policies for these specific groups of people?
Okay, so there is hybrid work policy, which is standard and uniform for everyone. There is no change in the policy for any person's specific work conditions or family conditions. So, and obviously policies have to be like that. There are benefits, surely, which are there, which we obviously provide. In some scenarios, obviously legally binding in some of the countries, and in some countries not so legally binding. So we were the first organization, actually. I mean, I'm not talking about hybrid, but I'm just telling you, for example, we were one of the first organizations specifically in this country, which actually had an extended maternity even when it was not legally binding. So, and obviously that also comes as flexible working, because you are working, but you can actually extend your maternity. Yeah. So you can obviously call it flexible. In terms of the hybrid policy, it's a choice. The most important aspect is that we are talking about flexible working, but we are not binding any flexible working as of now, that you should be there for 2 days or 3 days or 1 day. So we are saying flexible. Now, if you don't want to come, you're not forcing you. Till your manager agrees, till your team agrees. So that applies to everyone. It applies to, because we understand that there are working parents who have actually, or single parents, working parents, single parents, who have actually managed their life in the past 2 years in a certain way, and obviously dismantling it and probably even trying to come out of it would take time.
Right.
So we while we have introduced the policy, we still are very flexible. We are ourselves very flexible, whether that is 100%, 70%, 30%, 40% that people are following. So as of now, there's no. On the other hand, in terms of the benefits that I was talking, the crash facility and everything around Ericsson offices is a common practice. It's a common practice. So that is not exactly even for flexible working. We had that even when we were, even, when there was no ideal hybrid or flexible policy around, even it was present pre-pandemic. So those things are obviously part of our paraphernalia of benefits from long time back.
All right. Thanks so much, Abbas. Joy, there's a question for you. A lot of companies saw a spike in attrition numbers when companies started shifting from remote to in-office presence. Did you experience any of that, and how did you manage it?
Of course, we did experience, but I don't necessarily relate this to the fact that, organizations have started expecting people to be office-based is the reason. I don't think so. That was not the case with us. I believe, a lot of things being done remotely and life being run remotely called for a lot of, forums, platforms, applications, tools to be created, including work from home created a lot of monitoring tools, is what I'm told by several organizations. All of these things actually created high demand for tech talent in the market. And of course, people use the opportunity to explore some of those opportunities and figure out if they want to do something differently. And since this question came in, all of us got far more educated with our English vocabulary during these days. Great resignation, great frustration, great turnaround, all of those things, all of us have read enough. I, for one, my reaction to this whole situation was, what is happening outside is people are leaving jobs without valid reason. and people are joining organizations without valid convictions. Uh, uh, and that clearly explains, right? People don't know why are they leaving, and people don't know why are they joining a particular organization. All that you hear somebody saying is somebody has offered me more money. And that is not a very convincing reason for somebody to leave the organization. And I'm sure all of us have got access to all sorts of resources to read. I keep hearing that, in fact, the current set of attrition is happening because of the first onset of attrition that happened almost 18 or 24 months ago, wherein people just shifted for money alone, and they realized, they are not culturally getting set in, nor the organization was able to engage them, integrate them with the organization. As a result, people are looking for change again. So that's the unfortunate thing. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Joy. That's absolutely true. And we're seeing people coming back to organizations like yours or Ericsson, where they feel that they can be more comfortable with the culture, and where there's a lot more flexibility given to them, where they can be themselves. So
Keyuri,
definitely,
may
yeah.
I add a
Sure,
small
sure.
point?
Please go ahead.
It's a very interesting question, which actually has been, asked in various platforms. So I would just like to add up something to it.
Sure.
See, first of all, I do disagree that the Great Resignation obviously is there. There is no data specifically in economies like Asia, or there was a very small and a very brief period in US and some part of Europe where it was seen. Now that's the word which that's the phrase where it was coined, and then it was lapped up by people altogether. So I really don't see, there is no data-based validation for this argument. So there's no Great Resignation. In fact, a lot of organizations, great number of organizations, majority and maybe above 90% also, are still in lesser than pandemic, pre-pandemic, lesser than the attrition rates that they were pre-pandemic. So they still have not come up to those attrition rates. Yes, there are certain competencies, no doubt. There are certain competencies which are now hunted more than before. But that's a very small landscape of the larger picture of any tech organization, that too only for tech organizations.
Right.
A lot of tech organizations are seeing some specific competence, very. So for example, if you go and you say Kubernetes, suddenly you will see, because that's the kind of a thing which actually has jumped up in the past sometime. And I do understand that there's a wall of talent, but overall, if you say Great Resignation in a larger sense of the organization, that's not there. By the way, just for information, now we have stopped using the word Great Resignation. There is a new word which actually has, new phrase which actually has come up, and that's the Great Layoff. So now the organizations are actually laying off in huge numbers. That is coming to the news. I don't see them, and Great Resignation never picked up out here.
Thanks, Abbas. So before I just go to one last question that someone has raised, just for the audience, there's a short poll which has been launched, and we'd really appreciate your responding to that. So there's one question that has been asked, and this is not specific to anyone, so either of you can take this. Has there been any change in your reward and recognition philosophy because of hybrid working?
If I can go first, nothing.
Sure.
Yeah, nothing. Nothing of our rewards and recognition or any of the pay mechanisms or policies around got changed because of this hybrid environment. We continue to do all good things. For example, shift allowance. So many organizations actually logically reasoned it out as to what does shift allowance mean when people are remotely working or working from home. For us, we continue to pay all our employees shift allowance as applicable. Just to make a point that we didn't change anything. We just continue to operate, and that's what it is.
Thanks. Okay, so we have a minute. I'm just going to conclude and then thank the panelists and all the participants who attended the webinar. So some of the key messages we've got from our panelists is that to achieve hybrid success, one of the key things people need to do and are doing well is that they have to trust their employees. You can't be always looking to say, I'm not sure you're working on whatever. A point that Joy very validly raised was you have to be a good listener. You have to listen to your employees. You have to empower them, and you have to co-create whatever you're doing. You have to create a sense of equity between remote and in-person employees so that the unconscious bias doesn't continue creeping in. So these are some of the key messages, and you have to really make sure that employees understand why collaboration happens better in a in-person environment than working from home. So till we do all that, we can't expect hybrid to be successful. But thank you so much, Abbas and Joy, for all the wonderful ideas you've come up with. And I'm sure our participants have been enriched by all the conversations we've had. Yeah. Thanks so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, for all participants, as a short feedback form, we'd appreciate your feedback so that we can make such webinars more interesting and more relevant for you. So thanks a lot. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye. Bye.
Bye.